The delicate brush, barely wider than a strand of hair, danced across the canvas, coaxing centuries of accumulated grime from the surface of the grand 1902 wedding portrait. Dust motes, disturbed by the gentle friction, shimmered in the focused beam of the conservation lamp, illuminating a scene frozen in time. A young bride, resplendent in ivory lace, her gaze demurely cast downward. A picture of Edwardian grace and expectation. My breath hitched, a familiar, almost reverent pause in the meticulous rhythm of restoration. For weeks, I had been immersed in her world, carefully peeling back the layers of history, each stroke a conversation with the past. But then, beneath a particularly stubborn patch of oxidized varnish, just above the bride's clasped hands, a subtle incongruity emerged. It wasn't a crack, nor a repair, nor the typical fading of pigments. It was something far more deliberate, a faint alteration, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, precisely where a wedding band should have rested. My magnifying loupe brought the detail into sharp focus. The finger, meant to be adorned, showed a faint, ghost-like impression, a shadow where a ring had once been, or perhaps was meant to be. But what truly arrested my attention was the faint, almost translucent layer of paint covering it, a careful, almost hurried attempt to obscure. It wasn't a flaw in the original artistry. It was a later intentional modification, expertly blended to disappear into the background of her pristine white glove. The small, deliberate strokes suggested not an accident, but a secret, carefully painted over, perhaps even by the bride herself or someone close to her, long after the original artist had finished their work. A shiver, not of cold, but of profound understanding, traced its way down my spine. This wasn't merely a restoration. It was an archaeological dig into a personal history, a whisper from a woman who had, for reasons unknown, chosen to conceal a pivotal detail of her most public day. My hand, steady from years of practice, paused. The professional detachment I usually maintained in the lab momentarily gave way to a surge of pure, unadulterated curiosity. This wasn't just paint and canvas anymore. It was a plea, a silent scream etched into the fabric of time. The implications were immediate, vast, and deeply personal. What could compel a bride on the threshold of a new life to erase a symbol so central to her identity and public image? The initial revelation was shocking yet subtle, a tiny crack in the veneer of a perfectly composed portrait, hinting at a deeper truth without fully exposing its devastating impact. The quiet hum of the air purifier in the lab suddenly seemed to amplify the silence, making the weight of this century-old secret almost palpable. My mind raced, piecing together the possibilities, each more intriguing than the last. This tiny, deliberate act of concealment, seemingly minor, felt like a profound betrayal, or perhaps a desperate act of self-preservation. It was the beginning of an unraveling, a thread pulled from the tightly woven tapestry of the past, promising to expose a story far more complex than any casual observer could ever imagine. Some secrets, it seems, are indeed meant to be found. To truly understand the profound weight of such an act, we must transport ourselves back to 1902, the year this portrait was painted. It was a world vastly different from our own, a time when the very fabric of society was stitched with rigid social norms and expectations, particularly for women. The turn of the 20th century, often romanticized as the Edwardian era, was a period of immense social stratification and deeply entrenched traditions. For a woman, marriage was not merely a union of two hearts. It was a cornerstone of her existence, often dictating her social standing, economic security, and even her identity. A woman's worth was frequently measured by her ability to secure a good marriage, one that elevated her family's status, or at least maintained it. Love, while desirable, often took a backseat to duty, financial stability, and the preservation of family lineage. In many communities, especially the more traditional or rural ones, societal pressures were immense. A woman was expected to transition seamlessly from the care of her father to the dominion of her husband. Her public image was meticulously curated. Any deviation from the prescribed path of modesty, obedience, and domesticity could lead to social ostracization. A wedding portrait, therefore, was not just a memento. It was a public declaration, a visual testament to a woman's successful entry into respectable married life. It was a symbol of her commitment, her new status, and her adherence to the societal contract. To appear on one's wedding day, the pinnacle of a woman's public life, and then to deliberately obscure a symbol of that union, was an act of profound defiance, a silent rebellion against the very expectations that defined her world. Daily life for women in 1902 was largely confined to the domestic sphere, though whispers of suffrage and greater independence were beginning to stir in urban centers. For most, however, their universe revolved around home, family, and community. Customs dictated everything from the clothes they wore to the company they kept, and marriage was the ultimate rite of passage. The prevailing attitudes towards love were often pragmatic. A good match was one that secured a future, not necessarily one that ignited passion. Duty to family, particularly to one's parents, often superseded personal desires. A daughter was an asset, her marriage a strategic alliance. Imagine the immense pressure on a bride, standing before an artist, knowing that this image would be her enduring legacy, her public face to the world. What kind of secret, what unbearable burden, could compel her to alter that indelible record, to leave a hidden mark that whispered of a truth she dared not speak aloud? The cultural background of this era builds the world the bride inhabited, highlighting the immense constraints and expectations she faced, making her subtle act of concealment resonate with a power that transcends time. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are watching from in the comments. The young woman whose secrets now whispered from beneath layers of aged pigment was born into a world defined by rigid expectations, a world where a woman's worth was often measured by the strength of her marital bond and the perceived honor it brought to her family. Her childhood, while outwardly serene, was a tapestry woven with unspoken duty and the heavy hand of tradition. Raised in a household that valued propriety, she was taught her destiny was not her own, but a path laid out by her elders. Her parents, pillars of their community, embodied the era's stern virtues, their love often expressed through strict adherence to social codes. This created an atmosphere of quiet pressure, subtly guiding every choice towards a predetermined future. The small, tightly knit community amplified these pressures. Gossip was currency, and reputations were fragile, shattered by deviation from the norm. Social gatherings and church were veiled audits of character, scrutinizing young women for grace, obedience, and suitability for marriage. Local traditions dictated a meticulous courtship, public engagement, and a wedding serving as both celebration and declaration of family alliances. For a girl of her standing, the path was clear: find a respectable husband, produce heirs, and maintain the family name with dignity. Yet beneath the veneer of quiet compliance, a spirited nature flickered, perhaps a rebellious glint in her eyes, a fleeting defiant thought, or a quiet yearning for a life unburdened by expectation. She found solace in books, in the rustle of leaves in the secluded garden, places where she could momentarily shed the heavy cloak of convention and dream of unfitting possibilities. These were private rebellions, small acts of intellectual escape hinting at an inner turmoil rarely glimpsed by her family. Her parents, particularly her father, held firm convictions about advantageous matches. He was a man of stern countenance, his word law. Her mother, while softer, was an enforcer of social graces, perpetually concerned with appearances. While no overt cruelty existed, their expectations formed an invisible cage around the young bride-to-be, reinforced by her elder brother's unyielding tradition and her younger sister's naive acceptance. Any whisper of dissent, any hint of individual desire was met with quiet, firm redirection back to the expected path. The groom, chosen for his suitable lineage and burgeoning business prospects, was introduced not as a companion, but as preordained destiny. He was outwardly charming and ambitious, but beneath the surface, subtle dissonances emerged. A dismissive wave when she voiced an opinion, a casual disregard for her preferences, or a chilling certainty in his pronouncements left little room for her input. These were not grand confrontations, but hairline cracks in the facade of a perfect union, barely perceptible to outsiders, yet deeply felt by the young woman whose life was being meticulously arranged. The courtship, a public performance of propriety, became a series of small emotional aggressions. His words, intended as complimentary, often felt like pronouncements of ownership. His gaze, described by others as admiring, sometimes held a possessive glint that sent a shiver down her spine. Conversations with her mother, ostensibly about wedding preparations, were often veiled lectures on a wife's duties and upholding her husband's honor. Every social interaction reinforced the message. Her identity was soon to be subsumed into his. Her dreams replaced by the expectations of her new role. These early experiences built a foundation of quiet desperation. She learned to mask her true feelings, presenting a serene front while her inner world churned with unspoken anxieties. The weight of her family's legacy, the community's watchful eyes, and her fiancé's firm grip created an inescapable feeling of suffocation. She began to understand that her wedding day, far from a joyous culmination of love, was shaping up to be the formal sealing of her fate, a public declaration of her surrender to a life she increasingly feared. The idea of concealment, therefore, was not a sudden, impulsive act. It was a slow-burning ember, kindled by years of subtle suppression and the gradual erosion of her autonomy. Each dismissive comment, each unyielding tradition, each forced compliance chipped away at her spirit, leaving her with an ever-deepening resolve to reclaim some small part of herself, to leave a mark that was truly her own, even if hidden. The portrait, she must have realized, would be her only canvas for this silent rebellion. The pre-existing conditions, the ancient tensions simmering within her family and broader societal structures, had created the perfect storm. The stage was set for a quiet struggle, a battle fought not with words or grand gestures, but with the subtle power of a hidden truth. As the wedding day drew nearer, pressures would intensify, pushing her further towards a desperate act of self-preservation, an act that would ultimately be captured and then concealed within the very fabric of her wedding portrait, waiting patiently for a century to be found. The weeks leading up to the wedding became a slow, agonizing march toward a fate she hadn't chosen. Each day brought a fresh wave of disappointment, another erosion of her already fragile hope. It wasn't one grand act of cruelty that broke her, but 1,000 tiny cuts, each one leaving a scar on her soul. I remember reading a letter, carefully preserved among her belongings, a simple note from her fiancé regarding the wedding arrangements. He dismissed her preferences for the floral arrangements with a curt, "Mother knows best," effectively silencing her voice in what was supposed to be her special day. It seemed a small thing, a mere detail, but it spoke volumes about the power dynamics in their relationship. Her desires, her opinions, were secondary, subservient to the expectations of others. The societal pressures were relentless, too. The whispers started subtly, little darts thrown from the shadows of polite conversation. Her choice of gown was deemed too simple, her demeanor not quite cheerful enough. The neighbors, the relatives, all seemed to have an opinion on how she should behave, how she should feel, how she should embody the perfect bride. Each comment, each sideways glance, added to the weight she carried, crushing her spirit beneath the burden of expectation. I found a diary entry from that time, a raw and unfiltered expression of her inner turmoil. She wrote of feeling like a puppet, her strings pulled by unseen hands, her every move dictated by the whims of others. She longed for escape, for a breath of fresh air, for a moment of genuine freedom. But escape seemed impossible, a distant dream shrouded in the mists of societal obligation. The discussions within her family became increasingly strained. Her attempts to voice her concerns were met with dismissals, assurances that she would grow to love him, that marriage was a duty, not a choice. Her father, a man of tradition and unwavering belief in the sanctity of marriage, couldn't comprehend her reservations. Her mother, caught between her daughter's unhappiness and the desire for societal approval, offered platitudes and empty reassurances. There was one instance, recounted by a distant cousin in a faded family history, where she attempted to postpone the wedding, citing a sudden illness. But her plea was dismissed as mere pre-wedding jitters, a common ailment easily cured with rest and a strong dose of societal pressure. The cousin noted her pale complexion and haunted eyes, a silent testament to the internal battle she was waging. The psychological atmosphere within her home became suffocating. The air was thick with unspoken expectations, with the weight of tradition, with the silent judgment of those who couldn't understand her inner turmoil. She felt trapped, isolated, a prisoner in her own life. The wedding day loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon, promising not joy and fulfillment, but a lifetime of quiet desperation. As the wedding day drew nearer, her hope dwindled, replaced by a chilling resignation. She began to detach herself emotionally, retreating into a silent world of her own making. She went through the motions, attending the fittings, smiling for the photographs, but her eyes remained distant, devoid of the spark that had once defined her. It was as if a part of her had already died, leaving behind only a shell, a hollow imitation of the woman she once was. The realization that her marriage might not be one of love, but of duty or convenience, settled upon her like a heavy shroud. She saw the arrangement for what it was, a transaction, a merging of families, a securing of social standing. Her own happiness, her own desires, were irrelevant, secondary to the larger purpose of maintaining the family's position in society. This realization was perhaps the most devastating blow of all, the final nail in the coffin of her hopes and dreams. She was reaching a breaking point, and I could sense that some act of defiance, some desperate attempt at self-preservation, was inevitable. The pressure was simply too much to bear. The days leading up to the wedding blurred into an agonizing countdown, each sunrise bringing with it a fresh wave of despair. It was during this period, just a week before the ceremony, that the groom, oblivious or perhaps indifferent to her palpable misery, delivered what felt like the final crushing blow. He arrived at her family home, not alone, but with his own parents, to finalize the details of their future life together. It wasn't the practicalities that wounded her, but the callous manner in which her own aspirations were dismissed. She had, in a moment of fleeting courage, voiced a quiet desire to continue her charitable work, a small passion she had cultivated aiding the less fortunate in the village. Her fiancé, with a dismissive wave of his hand and a chuckle that grated on her nerves, declared it unsuitable for a woman of her new station. His mother, ever the watchful matriarch, added that her sole focus should now be on her husband and future home. The very air in the room seemed to constrict around her, stealing her breath, as her own parents remained silent, offering no defense. It was a public humiliation, a stark declaration that her identity, her very essence, was to be entirely subsumed by her new role. This incident, more than any other, solidified her resolve. The last vestiges of hope, the fragile belief that perhaps somehow things might improve, shattered into 1,000 pieces. She saw her future stretched before her, a barren landscape devoid of personal joy or purpose, dictated by a man who saw her as little more than a decorative accessory. The tears she had suppressed for so long refused to fall, replaced instead by a cold, hard knot of defiance in her stomach. She would go through with the wedding, she would fulfill her duty, but she would not surrender entirely. A part of her, a crucial, vital part, would remain her own, hidden from the world, a silent scream against the suffocating expectations. The wedding day dawned, a crisp, clear morning that seemed to mock the turmoil within her. The sun streamed through her bedroom window, illuminating the white lace of her gown, laid out meticulously by her mother. Every detail was perfect, every stitch a testament to the societal ideal she was meant to embody. But as she gazed at her reflection, a stranger stared back, a pale, haunted figure adorned in the trappings of joy, her eyes betraying a profound emptiness. Her heart hammered not with excitement but with a dull, persistent dread, The house buzzed with activity, the laughter and chatter of relatives echoing through the halls, each sound a painful reminder of the charade she was about to perform. She moved through the preparations in a trance, her hands mechanically adjusting her veil, her mind miles away, grappling with the monumental decision she had made in the quiet hours of the night. The ceremony itself was a blur of faces, solemn vows, and the heavy scent of lilies. She stood beside her groom, a man who now represented everything she feared, her hand trembling slightly as she accepted the ring. The words, "I do," felt hollow, devoid of true meaning, a mere echo of what was expected of her. She felt the weight of every gaze, every expectation pressing down, but beneath the surface, a fierce, protective instinct had awakened. She was no longer just the dutiful daughter or the compliant bride. She was a woman on the precipice of an unspoken rebellion. It was immediately after the ceremony, amidst the joyous chaos of congratulations and family photographs, that the moment for the portrait arrived. The artist, a stern-faced man named Mr. Abernathy, known for his ability to capture the solemn dignity of the era, had set up his easel and camera in the grand drawing room. The light from the tall windows poured in, casting a soft glow on the ornate furnishings. She was positioned on a velvet settee, her groom standing proudly beside her, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. Her parents, beaming with pride, stood behind them, their faces radiating satisfaction. Mr. Abernathy fussed with the lighting, adjusted her posture, and instructed her to hold still. "To look happy, my dear. It is your wedding day." She complied, a practiced smile pasted on her lips. But her gaze, though seemingly directed at the camera, held a distant, almost defiant quality. Her internal monologue was a torrent of raw emotion. Anger, sorrow, a desperate need to reclaim a piece of herself. And then, in a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, as Mr. Abernathy bent to adjust his lens for the final shot, she acted. With her left hand, the one adorned with her new wedding band, she reached down, her fingers brushing against the delicate lace of her gown. Hidden beneath the voluminous folds of the fabric, tucked carefully into a tiny, almost invisible pocket she had sewn herself, was a single, small, but deeply significant object. It was a miniature silver thimble, an heirloom from her grandmother, a woman known for her fierce independence and quiet strength. The thimble was not merely an object, it was a symbol. It represented her grandmother's spirit, her own unfulfilled aspirations, the quiet, persistent work of women who built lives with their hands and their wits, often unacknowledged. In that precise moment, as the camera's flash ignited, she subtly shifted her hand, pressing the thimble against her palm, ensuring that her fingers curled just enough to obscure the wedding band from a certain angle. It was a gesture of profound defiance, a silent declaration that while her hand might be given in marriage, her spirit, her true self, remained her own, protected, hidden, and forever linked to a lineage of quiet strength. The why was clear. She was not merely hiding a ring, she was hiding her submission. She was inscribing her truth into the very fabric of her public image, a secret message to any who might one day truly look. This act, so small yet so monumental, transformed the portrait from a mere record of a wedding into a profound testament to resilience and hidden struggle, a silent scream captured on canvas for over a century, waiting to be heard. The wedding day arrived, a blur of white lace and forced smiles, a ceremony performed under the oppressive gaze of expectation. The hidden act, whatever subtle defiance she had woven into the very fabric of her painted image, was now complete, a silent testament to a spirit refusing to be entirely extinguished. As the vows were exchanged, and the portrait carefully put aside to dry, a new chapter began, not with the lightness of joy, but with the heavy, unsettling quiet of a secret born. In the immediate aftermath, a profound stillness settled over her, a strange calm that followed the storm of internal conflict. She moved through the congratulatory embraces and the well-wishes with a detached grace, her eyes holding a distant quality that few, if any, truly noticed or understood. Life with the secret began immediately. A constant, silent companion that whispered to her from the depths of her own consciousness and, perhaps, from the very canvas that now hung in the formal parlor of her new home. This concealed truth, embedded within her portrait, and by extension within her very soul, began to subtly yet profoundly shape her marriage and her daily existence. The initial days were a haze of new routines, unfamiliar surroundings, and the ever-present weight of her husband's expectations. She performed her duties diligently, managed the household with an efficiency that belied her inner turmoil, and met the gazes of her new family with unpracticed politeness. Yet, beneath this veneer of wifely perfection, the secret thrummed, a low, persistent vibration that altered her perception of everything. The reactions of her new family, her husband, and even her old neighbors were a complex tapestry of observation and misinterpretation. They saw a quiet, perhaps somewhat reserved young woman settling into her role. Her mother-in-law, a woman of formidable presence, remarked on her decorum, her appropriate silence mistaking her withdrawal for respectful deference. Her husband, perhaps too preoccupied with his own affairs or too accustomed to the prevailing societal norms, seemed to perceive her quietness as contentment, a natural progression from the pre-wedding jitters. There were no dramatic confrontations, no overt signs of distress that would warrant intervention. Instead, her changes were subtle, a slight hesitation before speaking, a gaze that lingered a moment too long on a distant horizon, a forced cheerfulness that felt brittle at its edges. These subtle shifts in her demeanor went largely unnoticed, or if they were glimpsed, they were easily dismissed. Her old friends, visiting occasionally, might have noted a newfound maturity, a certain gravity in her eyes, attributing it to the responsibilities of marriage. The community, ever watchful, saw only what they expected to see, a young bride fulfilling her destiny, a picture of domesticity. They saw the external world she presented, a carefully constructed facade designed to blend seamlessly into the tapestry of polite society. But the internal reality she was living was a stark contrast, a landscape of quiet defiance and profound isolation, where the hidden truth became her most intimate confidant. Emotionally, the bride experienced a complex, often contradictory mix of feelings. There was, undoubtedly, an initial pang of pain and regret over the necessity of her act. The knowledge that her wedding day, a moment meant for unbridled joy, had been marred by a desperate act of concealment, left a lingering ache. Yet, intertwined with this sorrow was a quiet, almost subversive sense of relief. The act, however small, had been hers. It was a tiny assertion of self in a world that sought to erase her individuality, a defiant whisper in the face of a deafening roar of expectation. This relief was not jubilant, but a deep, internal exhale, the kind that comes after holding one's breath for far too long. There was also a profound shock at the stark reality of her new life. The fairy tale narrative of marriage, so often peddled by society, crumbled before the mundane, often lonely, truth of her daily existence. The expectations were heavier, the silences longer, and the companionship more superficial than she had ever imagined. The shock, however, did not break her. Instead, it seemed to solidify something within her, forging a renewed sense of inner strength, derived directly from her secret act of self-preservation. The hidden detail in the portrait was not merely a mark, it was a pact she had made with herself, a promise to endure, to remember, and to never entirely surrender. The hidden truth became a constant companion, a silent burden that she carried with a strange pride. It was a secret language spoken only between her and the canvas, a private rebellion that no one else could ever decipher. In moments of quiet solitude, she would gaze at the portrait, not with resentment, but with a complex understanding. The painting, once a symbol of her entrapment, now served as a powerful reminder of her quiet agency. It was a source of inner power, a wellspring of resilience that she could draw upon when the pressures of her marriage and societal expectations threatened to overwhelm her. This secret empowered her, not through overt acts of rebellion, but through a profound internal fortitude. This hidden truth fundamentally influenced her interactions. She learned to listen more carefully, to observe more keenly, to read between the lines of polite conversation, because she herself was living a life between the lines. Her perception of her own identity within the confines of her marriage and society began to shift. She was no longer just the dutiful wife, the demure daughter-in-law, or the respectable lady of the house. She was also the keeper of a secret, a silent warrior who had carved out a space for herself, however small, in a world that sought to define her entirely. This dual identity, the public persona and the private rebel, allowed her to navigate the complexities of her new life with a quiet strength that would surprise anyone who only saw the surface. The portrait, hanging silently, bore witness to the beginning of this profound transformation, a life lived not in resignation, but in quiet, persistent defiance. The immediate shock and raw pain, the quiet defiance of her wedding day act, slowly began to recede, not vanishing entirely, but settling into a deeper, more manageable ache within her soul. The years that followed were not a sudden burst of liberation, but a slow, arduous process of emotional reconstruction. It was a journey measured in small, almost imperceptible steps, each one a testament to a quiet resilience she had not known she possessed. Her life was still circumscribed by the rigid expectations of 1902 society, by the unspoken duties of a wife, by the constant scrutiny of a community that valued appearance above all else. Yet, within these formidable confines, she began to carve out a space for herself, a sanctuary of her own making, a realm where her true self could breathe. She learned to navigate the currents of her marriage with a practiced grace, a superficial calm that masked the tempest within. Her husband, perhaps oblivious to the true depth of her being, or perhaps simply choosing to ignore the deeper currents of her spirit, accepted her compliance as contentment. This outward conformity became her most effective shield, allowing her to preserve her inner world, to cultivate a self that was entirely her own, untouched by external demands. This was one of her first hard-won victories, the reclamation of her inner landscape, a fiercely guarded territory where her thoughts and feelings could exist without judgment. She had found a way to be present in her life while simultaneously holding a piece of herself in reserve, a private garden of the soul. The initial sting of having relinquished cherished dreams, of a love she had once envisioned, never truly faded. It was a persistent ache, a phantom limb of what might have been, a constant whisper of a different life. Yet with time, this ache transformed. It became less a source of despair and more a quiet reminder of her own capacity for profound desire, a secret wellspring of strength that fueled her quiet determination. She discovered that, even within the confines of her arranged life, there were unexpected alliances to be forged. A sympathetic maid, whose knowing glances offered silent understanding. A distant aunt, who had herself known quiet sorrow and whispered words of encouragement. Even a few of her husband's more progressive acquaintances who, through shared intellectual interests, offered fleeting moments of genuine connection. These individuals, through shared glances or hushed conversations, provided small windows into a world beyond her immediate reality. These connections, though often subtle and few, were vital lifelines, affirming her humanity and reminding her she was not entirely alone in her complex internal world. Her secret, etched into the very fabric of her wedding portrait, became a constant companion. It was not a burden that weighed her down, but rather a silent confidant, a potent symbol of her quiet defiance and unwavering self-possession. It shaped her character in profound ways. No longer the naive girl who had been crushed by expectation, she matured into a woman of remarkable discernment, acutely aware of the nuances of human behavior, of the often unspoken truths that lay beneath polite society. The experience instilled in her a deep empathy for others who were similarly constrained, a quiet understanding for those forced to wear masks, to hide parts of themselves to survive. She saw the unspoken struggles beneath polite smiles, the hidden pains behind societal facades, recognizing kindred spirits in unexpected places. This newfound empathy, though born of her own suffering, became a source of unexpected connection, allowing her to forge deeper, more meaningful bonds with those few who saw beyond the surface, creating a quiet network of understanding. Her maturation was evident not in grand, dramatic gestures, but in the subtle shifts of her perspective, the deepening of her inner life. The initial shock and pain had given way to a profound self-awareness. She understood that while she could not change her external circumstances entirely, she held absolute control over her reaction to them, over her internal narrative, over the meaning she ascribed to her own existence. She began to find solace and purpose in pursuits that were entirely her own, passions that nourished her spirit independently of her marital role. She discovered a profound and hidden passion for botany, spending countless hours in the garden, meticulously tending to her plants, nurturing life from tiny seeds. In the delicate cycle of growth and decay, of resilience in the face of harsh seasons, she found a powerful metaphor for her own life, a quiet reassurance that even in dormancy, there was always potential for renewal, for blooming anew. She also began to read voraciously, devouring books that transported her to other worlds, expanding her mind beyond the narrow confines of her own existence, finding intellectual freedom in the pages of novels and philosophical texts. These intellectual journeys were her acts of subtle rebellion, her quiet assertion of an independent spirit that refused to be confined. The path she forged was indeed unconventional for her era, not in outward defiance that would invite scandal, but in the rich, vibrant internal landscape she cultivated. She learned to derive meaning from small acts of kindness, from the fleeting beauty of a sunset, from the quiet satisfaction of a task meticulously and lovingly done. Her personal relationships, especially with her own children when they arrived, were infused with a fierce protectiveness and an understanding born of her own experiences. She instilled in them a profound sense of individuality, a quiet courage to question, to seek their own truths, hoping they would never have to endure the same silent battles she had fought. She taught them the importance of inner strength, of finding joy in unexpected places, and of holding on to one's authentic self, even when the world demanded conformity. She wanted them to know that true strength lay not in outward displays, but in the integrity of one's spirit. The secret she carried, the truth hidden in plain sight within her wedding portrait, became a cornerstone of her identity. It wasn't a source of bitterness that poisoned her days, but rather a profound well of self-knowledge and quiet power. She understood the true cost of silence, but also the transformative power of quiet resistance. She learned that purpose could be found not just in grand pronouncements or public achievements, but in the steadfastness of one's spirit, in the dignity with which one faced adversity, in the quiet acts of creation and self-preservation. Her early trauma had not broken her. Instead, it had tempered her, refining her into a woman of quiet strength, profound depth, and unwavering moral clarity. She forged a meaningful existence, not by escaping her reality, but by transforming her relationship with it, by finding agency within its boundaries. Her life became a testament to the enduring human spirit, carrying her secret with a dignity and purpose that transcended the narrow expectations of her time, blooming in unexpected ways, a quiet rebellion against the canvas of her own life. The woman who stood before the painter on her wedding day, a figure of quiet desperation, had evolved into a woman of quiet power, her secret, a constant burning ember of self-possession, illuminating her path forward. The woman, having forged her quiet rebellion and found her profound strength, eventually passed from this world, leaving behind a legacy not only in the lives she touched, but also in the silent testament captured on canvas. Her wedding portrait, once a symbol of a constrained future, became a vessel of her enduring spirit, embarking on its own silent journey through the annals of time. It remained within the family for several generations, a cherished heirloom, its surface gradually acquiring the patina of age, each year adding another whisper of history to its already profound story. Initially, it hung prominently in the drawing room of her eldest daughter, then moved to a sunnier spot in a grandchild's study, its colors mellowing, its details softening under the gentle erosion of time and light. The family knew it as Grandmother Eleanor's wedding portrait, a beautiful relic of a bygone era, admired for its artistic merit and sentimental value, yet its deepest secret remained perfectly intact, hidden beneath layers of history and artistic intent. As decades turned into a century, the portrait's journey continued, reflecting the shifting tides of the family's fortunes and movements. It traveled across continents when one descendant emigrated, then returned to its country of origin, carefully crated and uncrated, each transfer a moment of potential fragility, yet it endured. Eventually, as families branched out and heirlooms were distributed, the portrait found its way into the hands of a distant relative, less connected to the immediate story of Eleanor, but still appreciative of its historical charm. This relative, recognizing its age and potential value, eventually consigned it to a reputable auction house, where it was acquired by a private collector with a discerning eye for early 20th century portraiture. This collector, a passionate preservationist, understood that such a piece, despite its apparent good condition, carried the weight of time and would benefit from professional attention. And so the portrait arrived at my studio, a quiet, unassuming canvas, yet to me it hummed with an almost imperceptible energy, a silent invitation to delve into its past. My initial encounter with the portrait was purely professional, driven by the customary assessment that precedes any restoration project. The canvas, a substantial piece, depicted a young woman in a traditional white gown, her gaze serene, almost wistful. The overall condition was fair for its age. The varnish had yellowed considerably, obscuring the vibrancy of the original pigments, and there were several minor abrasions, common wear and tear from a century of existence. However, even during this preliminary examination, my expert eye caught something subtly amiss, a faint whisper of an anomaly that sparked a flicker of professional curiosity. It wasn't immediately obvious, not a glaring crack or a peeling section, but rather a slight discoloration on the bride's left hand, a minute area where the texture seemed ever so slightly different from the surrounding paint. It was almost imperceptible, easily dismissed as a trick of the light or an artifact of aging varnish. But my intuition, honed over decades of working with historical pieces, urged me to look closer. This initial observation was the first thread in a century-old tapestry waiting to be unraveled. It led me to embark on a meticulous technical process of restoration, far beyond what the surface condition initially suggested. My studio transformed into a quiet laboratory, filled with the soft glow of specialized lights and the gentle hum of precision instruments. I began with a thorough photographic documentation, capturing the portrait under various light spectra: ultraviolet, infrared, raking light, each wavelength capable of revealing different layers of its history. The ultraviolet light, in particular, was revelatory. It showed areas of uneven fluorescence, indicating not just accumulated grime, but distinct layers of original and later applied materials. The area on the bride's hand, which had initially piqued my interest, glowed with a slightly different intensity, suggesting a localized intervention, a repair, or perhaps something more deliberate. My tools for this delicate operation were as varied as they were precise: fine scalpels with microscopic blades, cotton swabs dipped in custom-blended solvents, tiny brushes made from sable hair, and a high-powered microscope that allowed me to peer into the very structure of the paint layers. The process began with the painstaking removal of the accumulated grime and discolored varnish. This was a slow, meditative task, requiring absolute focus and a steady hand. Each cotton swab, after a gentle swipe, would carry away a yellowish-brown residue, gradually revealing the richer, truer colors beneath. It was like peeling back time itself, revealing the artist's original intent, stroke by painstaking stroke. As I progressed, the subtle irregularities on the bride's hand became more pronounced, no longer just a discoloration, but a distinct area of overpainting, carefully applied to match the surrounding tones, yet unmistakably a later addition. My suspicion grew, evolving from a mere hunch into a concrete hypothesis. Something had been intentionally altered. The overpainting was too precise, too deliberate to be a simple repair of damage. It suggested an act of concealment. I employed infrared reflectography, a technique that allows one to see through superficial paint layers to underdrawings or earlier paint applications. What I saw confirmed my growing conviction. Beneath the overpainted section, faint but discernible, were traces of the original brushstrokes, hinting at a detail that had been subsequently covered. The original form beneath was not an error corrected by the artist, but a distinct feature, carefully obscured. The implications were profound. This wasn't just a painting, it was a coded message, a silent confession from the past. The restorer in me was thrilled by the technical challenge, but the historian and empath within me felt a growing sense of awe and responsibility. The slow, painstaking uncovering of this hidden element was a journey of profound discovery. With each microscopic layer of overpaint I carefully removed, the original detail beneath began to emerge with increasing clarity. It was a painstaking process, requiring immense patience and an almost surgical precision, as I worked to differentiate between the original artist's hand and the subsequent concealing brushstrokes. The faint outlines became sharper. The colors beneath the yellowed concealment began to reveal their true hues. It was like an archaeological dig, but instead of earth and stone, I was sifting through pigments and binders, each reveal a clue, a fragment of a lost narrative. The delicate nature of the work emphasized the profound implications of each revealed detail. Every tiny flake of removed paint brought me closer to understanding the bride's truth, transforming my role from a mere conservator of art into an archaeologist of emotion, slowly, reverently, unearthing a century-old truth that had been deliberately, meticulously buried. The portrait was no longer just a painting. It was a silent witness, finally ready to speak its secret. The meticulous process of restoration had been a journey through time, a careful peeling back of layers, not just of paint and varnish but of history itself. Each brushstroke revealed more, each cleaned surface whispered secrets, until finally, after weeks of painstaking work, the moment of absolute clarity arrived. The final layer of overpaint, a subtle, almost invisible wash that had subtly altered the original artist's intention, yielded its grip, and the truth, hidden for over a century, was fully exposed. It was precisely as the initial anomaly had suggested, an alteration to the bride's left hand, the one traditionally adorned with the wedding ring. But it wasn't a missing ring nor a defiant gesture. Instead, beneath the carefully applied, slightly lighter pigment that had blended seamlessly with her skin tone, lay a simple, unadorned silver band. It was a ring, yes, but not the ornate diamond-studded engagement ring, nor the plain gold wedding band that rested prominently on top of it. This was a slender, delicate silver ring, worn on the very same finger, nestled tightly against her skin, almost as if it had been there first. The full significance of this act resonated with a quiet, devastating power. The bride, on the most public day of her life, had chosen to wear a ring that symbolized a personal, perhaps unspoken commitment, one that clearly predated or defied the union she was about to enter. It was a silent, desperate assertion of self, a tiny anchor to a truth she could not speak aloud, but refused to entirely relinquish. She had allowed the world to see the rings of duty and societal expectation, but beneath them, she had kept her own truth, a secret vow, a hidden allegiance. The painter, perhaps a confidant or simply an artist with a keen eye for human emotion, had captured it, and then, under duress or by her quiet instruction, had painted over it, leaving just enough of a trace for a future generation to uncover. The concealed silver band was not a symbol of a grand romance or a scandalous affair. It was a testament to her private world, a declaration of a heart that belonged, in some fundamental way, to herself, or to a memory, a hope or a silent promise made long before this arranged marriage. This revelation brought a posthumous moral and social reckoning to the forces that had shaped her life. The oppressive groom, the rigid societal expectations, the historical constraints that bound women to marriages of convenience or duty, all stood implicitly condemned by this small, defiant act. The portrait, once a symbol of a conventional union, now became a powerful indictment of a system that demanded conformity at the cost of individual spirit. The bride's silent defiance, preserved through decades, spoke volumes about the unseen struggles beneath the surface of polite society. The groom and the family who had likely orchestrated the marriage were stripped of their veneer of respectability, their actions laid bare by the quiet resilience of a woman they thought they had subdued. For the narrator, the restorer, and historian, this discovery was more than just a professional triumph. It was a profound act of emotional justice. To bring this hidden truth to light was to vindicate a woman whose voice had been silenced by her era. It was a quiet, profound vindication, realistic, and deeply moving. The small silver band recontextualized her entire life story. She was no longer merely a forgotten figure in a historical record, a demure bride caught in a loveless marriage. She transformed into a symbol of resilience, a quiet rebel against the constraints of her time. A woman who, even on her wedding day, found a way to assert her autonomy and preserve her inner truth. Her life, previously understood through the lens of duty and societal obligation, was now seen as a testament to the enduring human spirit, a narrative of quiet strength and unwavering self-possession. This single discovery resonated far beyond the confines of the portrait itself. It reshaped our understanding of history, particularly the often unseen struggles of women in the past. How many other hidden stories lie beneath the surface of official narratives, disguised by societal pressures or deliberately obscured? This portrait became a powerful reminder that history is not just about grand events and public figures, but about the countless individual lives, their quiet acts of resistance, their silent battles for identity and agency. It underscored the profound importance of looking closer, of questioning the accepted narratives, and of listening for the whispers of those who were denied a voice. The enduring power of art was never more evident. This portrait was not just a record of a moment, but a vessel that concealed and eventually revealed a profound human truth. It demonstrated that art could be a sanctuary for secrets, a silent confidant across centuries. The canvas, once a flat image, now throbbed with the weight of a life lived with quiet courage, a testament to the bride's unwavering will. The restorer's hands, having meticulously removed the layers of time, had not merely cleaned a painting. They had resurrected a spirit, given voice to a century-old plea, and brought a forgotten woman's triumph into the light. The portrait, a silent witness to a forced union, had been transformed into a vibrant testament to a woman's enduring spirit and her quiet refusal to be entirely defined by the world around her. As the final light caught the newly revealed silver band, glinting softly beneath the restored wedding ring, a profound silence settled. It was a silence filled with the weight of her journey, the resonance of a past bravely endured, and the quiet, undeniable triumph of a long-hidden truth finally brought to light. The bride, no longer a nameless face from a distant past, stood proudly, her secret now an open book, a testament to her strength, her resilience, and the universal human need to hold on to one's authentic self, no matter the cost. Her portrait, once a beautiful but conventional image, now stood as a powerful, living narrative. A silent scream transformed into a profound declaration, echoing across time, reminding us all that some secrets are indeed meant to be found.